You ever wonder what the digital workspace of a programming legend actually looks like? Well, today we're basically opening a time capsule. We're going to explore the desktops of some of the most influential developers on the planet, and we're comparing their setups from 2002 all the way to 2015. We'll see what's changed, what's stuck around, and, what it all really tells us. So let's dig in.
So what can an old screenshot really tell you? I mean, it seems like a simple question, right? But a screenshot, it's so much more than just a picture. It's a snapshot of a whole philosophy, a workflow, a set of priorities. And by comparing these, let's call them digital fingerprints, 13 years apart, we can uncover some really surprising truths about the people who build the tech we use every single day.
Okay, so we're looking at two totally different moments in time. First, you've got 2002. Think about it. Dial-up is just starting to fade, the dot-com bubble just burst. We're talking about the age of Netscape for browsing and Pine for email. And then bam, jump to 2015, a world with high-speed internet everywhere, smartphones in every pocket, and these super polished graphical interfaces. You'd think everything would be completely different, right? Well, maybe not everything.
So let's kick things off. We're going to treat these screenshots like artifacts in a digital dig site. I mean, we're not just looking at pixels here, we're trying to excavate the mindsets of the people who created them to really get how they work.
And this is what makes this so cool. We're talking about the desktops of some absolute legends. People like Brian Kernighan, one of the minds behind Unix itself, Rasmus Lerdorf, the guy who created PHP, and Bram Moolenaar, the author of the text editor Vim. I mean, these are literally the architects of our digital world. All right, so our first big find is, well, it's kind of a paradox. For a lot of these pioneers, the biggest change over 13 years was how little actually changed. The command line didn't just survive that whole time, it absolutely thrived. And this quote from Brian Kernighan in 2015 just sums it up perfectly. He says, "If you thought it was boring last time, check this out. You can just feel the sense of pride in that simplicity, can't you? It's not about being old-fashioned. It's about building a system that's so refined and so powerful that it just doesn't need to change." And yeah, the consistency is just striking. Take Kernighan. His desktop, both in 2002 and 2015, was, and I'm quoting him here, just X-term Windows to whatever Unix system I am using. That's it. And Richard Stallman, the founder of the GNU project, even more hardcore. He basically lives in a text mode console using Emacs. For him, the whole graphical interface thing is just an afterthought. So, what's the big idea here? It's simple, really. For these developers, the command line wasn't some kind of limitation. No way. It was, and it still is, the absolute peak of efficiency. Why? Because a small set of powerful text-based tools that you've mastered over decades, well, that's just way more effective than any flashy new graphical app you can throw at it. But okay, that's not the whole story, because even the most dedicated command line users aren't, purists about it. They're pragmatists. And they absolutely adopted graphical tools, GUIs or graphical user interfaces, whenever it actually made sense. Case in point, Bram Moolenaar, the creator of Vim, right? Probably the most famous text editor on the planet. Back in 2002, he was using Netscape right alongside his terminals. Fast forward to 2015, and he switched to Chrome. See, he didn't give up on browsers. He just picked up the newer, better tool for that specific job. And we see the exact same thing with Rasmus Lerdorf, the guy who made PHP. In 2002, he was all about Pine, a classic text-based email client. By 2015, he'd moved over to the graphical client Thunderbird. It's a practical choice. It's not about some big ideology. And this whole being pragmatic thing wasn't just about one or two apps. Check this out. Unix historian Warren Toomey, who calls himself a command line guy, always will be, shared this whole list of GUI tools he couldn't live without by 2015. We're talking Firefox, GIMP for images, Wireshark for networks, LibreOffice, VLC for video, the list goes on. It's the perfect example of using the right tool for the job, plain and simple. But here's the real key to understanding this. It comes from another quote by Rasmus Lerdorf. Even after switching to Thunderbird, he says, "Not that much has changed in 13 years. And you have to ask, why? It's because the core of his work, the real work, still happens in the terminal. The GUI apps are like helpful assistants, for sure, but the terminal, that's the main event." And this brings us to the deepest layer of our little digital excavation. The specific apps, Netscape, Chrome, Pine, Thunderbird, that's all just surface level stuff. What really, truly endured was the philosophy underneath it all.
Honestly, if you take away one thing, it's this. The tools are temporary. The principles are permanent. Brand names change, interfaces get shinier, but the core ideas that make these systems so powerful, they've stayed incredibly stable. And Warren Toomey just nails it with this one. He's talking about how his modern smartphone is unbelievably more powerful than the giant computers he started his career on. But he says he is so very happy that way down underneath all the modern gloss, the fundamental building blocks of Unix are still there. Those simple, powerful commands, open, close, read, write, fork, and exec. They're still running the show. And that is the secret sauce. That's the heart of the Unix philosophy. You create these small, simple tools that do one thing and do it really well. Then you can chain them together to do incredibly complex things. That principle is just as relevant today as it was decades ago.
So you might be wondering, how does a philosophy like that evolve for the modern era? Well, in 2015, developer Timothy Besset came up with this really fascinating idea he called screenshot as code.
So what does that even mean, screenshot as code? Well, instead of manually dragging his windows around or clicking through settings, he writes a script that defines his entire desktop configuration. So every single time he logs in, that code just runs and automatically builds his perfect workspace from scratch. Think about that. It is the ultimate modern expression of that classic Unix philosophy, using automation to build the very environment you work in.
So after digging through 13 years of digital history, where do we land? Well, we've learned that a desktop isn't just a collection of icons. It's a manifesto. It's a personal statement on how you believe work should get done. So let's wrap this up. What have we seen? First, that simplicity is incredibly powerful and it lasts. Second, that change usually happens for practical reasons, not because of trends. And maybe most importantly, a core philosophy can outlive any specific piece of tech. Your desktop isn't just a background image. It's a statement about how you interact with technology.
And that really leaves us with one last question, and this one's for you. Take a look at your own computer, your phone, your whole workflow. Forget about the newest, flashiest apps for a second. What tools, what habits, what core ideas have really stood the test of time for you? The answer? Well, it might just tell you more than you think.